Hey guys, we are back updating the Power Rankings for the Traitors US Season 3 following the 6th batch of episodes, also known as Episode 8. And this was just kind of a fine episode, nothing too special at the end of the day, even though there's still some stuff to get into here. But we have 11 players to talk about, as always, some more time. Let's go into the video. So starting off at number 11, we have the first boot from this week, and here we have Chriselle. And this wasn't too shocking by the end of it, or while I said last week that I thought Tom was a bit more likely to be murdered compared to her, at the point where Tom walked in on breakfast, I was pretty confident that Chriselle would be the victim here, and she was. And obviously, Chriselle is someone who I have very mixed feelings on as a player. I feel like she's someone who was a bit too loyal to Rob by the end of it. She also voted out Nikki, who was one of her closest allies, simply because she thought she was a traitor, and I felt like that was kind of suboptimal there. And again, I feel like with her being taken out right after Rob, someone that she was latching onto, it sort of made sense for her to be taken on the spot regardless, but she's obviously now out of the game, which is why she's here at number 11. Now moving on to number 10, and we have the other boot from this week, and here we have Sierra. And Sierra's someone who I've been pretty low on for a lot of the season here, and obviously she was someone who I was pretty certain was going home by the round table with the amount of talk there was about the coffin theory, with Sierra not really being someone who I was that high on beforehand, someone who wasn't really being propped up that much in the story. And then you have her talk before the roundtable about how she's a fighter and that she's going to stand up for herself, which to me was a pretty clear indication that she was not going to survive this and that she was a pretty clear target by the end of it, being voted out unanimously. And obviously she does have a pretty emotional exit, and you can argue that she got a bad draw with the fact that she had put into the coffin before, and she had gone along with voting out Nikki, only for Nikki to be a faithful there. So again, I do feel like Sierra got a pretty bad draw here, and even though she was someone I was never confident was actually going to win the game, but obviously she's now also out of the game to where she's here at number 10. And with that, we have 9 people left and again to talk about. As usual, I'll be ranking them based on how likely they are to win the game based on their edit and current game position. But at number 9, the person I believe is the least likely to win from this point on is still Sam, who did get a visibility spike in this episode. I will give him that, but he is still someone who I have no faith in to actually win the game here. And admittedly, it's looking like he's the next to go, as the next time on essentially spoils that he is the next boot here, where if you look at the chessboard that's on the next time on, you can see everyone's name there except for Sans, which makes me think that he's about to leave the game here. Now, even if it wasn't for that, I still would have probably expected Sans to be the next boot, considering he did get this visibility spike where he got to introduce himself, talking about how he's not originally from the US and that he's here to play the game, only for him to interrogate Carolyn when she comes into breakfast about what Alan was wearing during the twist that happened. And even beyond that, he have him being the main person advocating for the coffin theory and taking out Sierra, only for Sierra to not be a traitor there. So obviously that's not particularly great there. So again, I feel like even if it wasn't for the preview, I probably would have still had Sam pretty low here, with his visibility spike being set up to him being the next murderer, for instance. But with this added evidence of him not even being on the next time on, I'm pretty confident that Sam's about to lead the game, which is why he's all the way at the bottom at number 9. Now moving on to number 8, and we have another person who I'm pretty confident is not winning from this point, but number 8 we do have Danielle Reyes. And Danielle's someone who, again, I'm pretty happy she's still around, she's still in the game here, and technically has an in where we have her bond with Britney strengthening, and you have her trying to get Britney recruited to be a traitor here, only for Carolyn to be against it. And I feel like this Danielle Britney situation is probably going to come to a head sooner rather than later, to where the fact that we are suddenly getting this content about Danielle and Britney working together when we haven't really gotten much set up to that beforehand makes me think that they're about to be targeted in some way, either by Carolyn or people seeing them as a pretty big target in the house due to them being this clear duo, and with them being gamers, that it's pretty likely that one of them's going to be a traitor. Also doesn't help that there's more talk now about how one of the traitors has to be a woman, and through that narrows down the options even more. But I think something else to add in is what Chriselle said after she was murdered, where during her closing confessional, you have Chriselle saying that she wasn't surprised that Danielle was a traitor. And that makes me think that there is still quite a bit of sus against Danielle in the house. And even mixing in the Britney sus, I feel like with this increased focus on Danielle and Britney working together, mixing in all the sus that they have, that it makes me think that they're probably going to be targeted in the next few rounds. And more than likely, I think Danielle's going to be the boot over Britney here. So I'm not feeling that great about Danielle. I feel like her end may be coming sooner rather than later. And while I have said that during plenty of other weeks beforehand, I do think now we are probably getting to a breaking point here, which is why I do have Danielle still pretty low at number 8. Now moving on to number 7, and these next two people are just kind of non-factors on the season at this point, and through that they're pretty unlikely to win. But at number 7, we do have Dolores. I mean, there's not really much to say with Dolores here. I mean, she doesn't really do that much in the episode outside of voting for Sierra and saying how her vote wouldn't be enough to save her. So clearly losing one of her allies there. Even beyond that, I mean, outside of Tom getting off of her case when he previously thought that she was a traitor, I feel like it's still not enough to prop up Dolores, and through that she's probably not winning at this point, which is why she's here at number 7. Now moving on to number 6, and we have another person who has faded mostly into the background, and here we have Lord Ivar. And again, Lord Ivar is just kind of there at this point. The main reason he's above Dolores is that he does technically get his way in targeting Sierra, where he wanted to take Sierra out in a spot to where Dolores didn't. I mean, that's something, but beyond that, I feel like neither of them are winning. Really, they're kind of interchangeable in this list. But I feel like it's that slight difference that leaves Ivar just slightly above Dolores for me, which is why he's here at number 6. Now moving on to number 5, and this person has gone up a little bit since surviving the twist here, but number 5 we do have Tom Sandoval, and I think Tom's probably a dark horse at this point to potentially win this season, especially now that he survived this twist where he was shortlisted for murder here. Now, admittedly, I still don't think it's that likely, as again, he's still kind of this zany character, someone who you think could win, but it's kind of hard to imagine them actually pulling it out. But even so, like the fact that he does survive this round in a spot to where he was expecting to be murdered is at least something to point out here. And actually, now that he survived this particular round, I think he definitely has some legs to make a deeper run here, where we have gotten content of him earlier in the season being this detective. He obviously got a decent amount of credit for getting out Boss and Rob, even though other people got the sus. Tom was the one to get the credit there. And I think there's at least some groundwork to him eventually going on to be the surprise winner. Now, at the same time, he didn't have the greatest look during the round table where he said that women are historically better cheaters than men, only to backtrack and say better traitors. A bit of a Freudian slip there, but really, I think Tom is still someone who I think there's definitely some groundwork there for him to be the surprise winner, even though I'm still higher on other people to eventually pull it out, which is why I do have him here at number 5. Now moving on to number 4, and we are back now to the same top 4 as last week, and it's just a matter of ordering them. But at number 4, I did decide to go with the person who was technically close to being murdered, even though I didn't think it was going to happen, and here we have Dylan Efron. And again, I still think Dylan is someone who I have had relatively high for a lot of the season, and I do still see him as this major character on the season, even though I'm still having doubts over whether he'll actually pull it out or not. Where I think a big thing to point out from this episode is he is all in on targeting Britney at this point, where he talks all about Britney being a traitor, and a lot of that going back to what Derek had told him before Derek being murdered here. And obviously, I think through that, Dylan will probably be the one leading the charge to target Danielle and Britney at this next roundtable here. Though at the same time, I do question whether he'll truly be successful or not. And obviously, if he does fail, then I think that'll probably make him a big target in the game moving forward. And obviously, losing Boss Rob is definitely something that's a blow to his game, to say the least. But I still think Dylan's someone who's clearly been set up to be one of the main characters of the season up to this point. Or we even saw in this episode that he talked about going into the roundtable that he wanted to just go with the group and not worry too much about his thoughts, but then immediately regrets it after voting at Sierra and realizing that going on with the group was probably not the greatest idea. So again, he's still clearly being shown, and I don't think it's necessarily being shown in a bad light either. The reason he's not higher, though, is, again, I feel like he's someone who could be a bit too obvious of a winner by the end of it. I think the fact that he is continuing to be, like, someone who gets a decent amount of content could be construed as him being, like, this decoy winner by the end of it. And really, that's the main reason why I don't have him higher, but he's still someone who I see as a bit more of a likely of a winner compared to the likes of Dolores or Ivar, for instance, which is the big reason why he is here at number 4. Now moving on to number 3, and we have someone who's in a pretty similar spot to Dylan at this point, and here we have Gabby. And Gabby is someone who obviously survives his twist yet again, getting out of being a potential murder target here, and also someone who doesn't quite get their way in the actual vote, where they talk about targeting Britney and Danielle for a lot of it, and only to have to vote out Sierra at the point where Sierra becomes this pretty obvious target here. And she's still someone who does get unnecessary content, someone who the show seems to be going out of their way to show, where obviously you have her talking early on about how she's worried about Chriselle being murdered and how Chriselle was a strong faithful. And then later on in the episode, you have her talking about how she feels bad. So I think kind of similar to Dylan, Gabby is someone who's still getting a decent amount of content, even though she's not necessarily relevant to what's actually happening within the game, which could work out to her favor here, and it actually is a big reason why to have her still relatively high here. And you could definitely make the debate that one of Dylan or Gabby will go on to win the game by the end of it, based off the way that they've been shown. The reason they're not higher, though, is that I feel like from a pure gameplay perspective, I'm still not fully in on them, where obviously Gabby's someone who's been kind of on the outs for a decent amount of the game, and even Dylan is someone who, admittedly from a pure gameplay perspective, I'm not that impressed by his actual game here, where it seems like he is sort of just going along with what others are saying, and him not really being that intentional in how he's approaching the game here. So I do kind of worry for them in that regard, but I feel like for now, they're still probably one of the more likely faithfuls to go on to win the game, which is why I have Gabby here, number 3. Now moving on to number 2, and we actually had the same top 2 as last week, and it's just a matter of ordering them. By number 2, we have the same order as last week. By number 2, we do have Britney Haynes. And obviously there's a debate for Britney being lower here, as obviously we've been getting more setup of Britney and Danielle being this duo here, and obviously with Danielle seeming likely to be a target relatively soon, that obviously could backfire on Britney here. And along with that, you have this discussion between Carolyn and Danielle over whether to recruit Britney to be a traitor or not. And I am leaning towards Britney not being recruited to be the traitor here, where I feel like this cliffhanger just leads credence to Danielle agreeing to go on with Carolyn and them wanting to win the game together and not recruiting a traitor. Then also the spoilers from the preview, but whatever. But I do think Britney's still someone who I probably have faith in to stay in the game over Danielle, to where, as I said earlier, I think Danielle's probably going to take the fall between Danielle and Britney here. With Danielle having more setup to a downfall compared to Britney, I can definitely see Britney skating through that situation here. And she's still someone who I could still see going on to win the game. I think she's someone who has definitely avoided a lot of the negativity that she probably could be getting here. Where despite her being this target during a lot of the game, I feel like she hasn't been getting dunked on the edit as much as you probably would expect. And while that could be due to her like being safe in the game, and they could just be saving a Britney downfall for later, I think the fact that Britney has kind of been shielded in the edit kind of works to her benefit here, and makes me think that she could still be this dangerous player that's able to skate through the game. So I'm still willing to give Britney the benefit of the doubt, but still I think the number 1 person is someone I feel a bit better about at this point, which is why she's here at number 2. And now, at number 1, the person I believe is the most likely to win the Traitors US Season 3 at this point is still Carolyn Weiger. And I don't think much has changed for Carolyn this episode, where obviously we are starting to see her sticking up for herself a bit more and kind of getting her way a bit more, in the sense that we have her sticking up to Danielle when Danielle wants to bring in Britney here. And I think Carolyn's actually going to get her way here. I think Carolyn is going to be able to convince Danielle to not recruit Britney to be a traitor here. And considering that Britney and Danielle have been brought up on the show as being more of this duo, I think Carolyn's going to have a role in breaking that up at some point, which I think is all pretty good there. I think another thing propping up Carolyn is what Chriselle said on her way out, where she said that she was simply shocked that Carolyn was a traitor here, which made me think that Carolyn doesn't have that much sus on her outside of Britney, obviously. So I still think Carolyn's actually in a pretty good spot to get through more of the game here. And I feel like we haven't really seen as many holes in Carolyn's edit that would make me think that Carolyn's going to have this downfall. Now, I do think if she were to have a downfall, it would come from the likes of Dylan or Gabby at this point, if one of them starts to really pop off in the edit here. But I think until we actually see that, I'm still going to have Carolyn relatively high here as the most likely winner from the Traitors perspective, obviously. And I think, depending on how the Faithfuls go about it, I think Carolyn could still get her way through a lot of the game without having the sus on her to probably be taken out. So I think it's for those reasons I'm still going to have Carolyn here at number 1, even though you can definitely debate it either way. And there we go, that will do it for this week's video. If you like this content, be sure to like and subscribe, really helps out with the channel. Now I'll be back again next week to update the power rankings again, so you can look forward to that. I'm covering Australian Survivor as well as Survivor 48, so you can expect weekly power rankings of those shows. I'm on Patreon and have a YouTube membership, so if you want to consider supporting the channel, you can do so by clicking the link in the description, and you can also join the Discord server by also clicking the link in the description. There's a lot of stuff coming your way, but for now, that is the video. See ya.